Hey guys, how we doing? So Dan from Trading with Dan here. So an interesting article that I came across today. It was actually published today, Wednesday, April 22nd, in the Daily Mail online. So UN warns of biblical famines of 250 million people as coronavirus threatens to leave 36 nations starving. So this is a pretty important thing that we need to realise, is that obviously shutting down the world's economies and all the shock to the supply systems and the agriculture and the trade and just the general economic activity. I mean, the world doesn't necessarily overproduce loads and loads of food, and there are people starving, and there's famine across the world in various places in normal times. So I don't know how they think they're gonna basically be able to feed everybody now they've caused such an economic shock to the system. So we'll have a read through this article. The United Nations warned that the coronavirus could trigger famines around the world. Worldwide freeze on e-commerce has sent shockwaves through financial markets. The World Food Programme Director has warned millions could be forced into starvation. Those suffering acute hunger predicted to nearly double to 265 million this year. So if we actually look at this though, those suffering acute hunger are predicted to nearly double to 265 million. So that is telling me at the moment there's obviously 132.5 million people this year that were starving. So if there's that many people starving this year, and I think it's only going to double this year. Sorry, there's only half that last year, and it's going to double this year. I think it's going to more than double, surely. I mean, I don't think that's a correct prediction. But anyway, so the United Nations has warned the virus pandemic could trigger famine as worldwide freezes on commerce. I was used to saying e-commerce there. On commerce sent shockwaves through the financial markets. A bleak warning came on Tuesday as deaths from the virus surpassed 174,000 worldwide, with governments anxious trying to chart a path out of the unprecedented global health and economic emergency. So this is the global deaths so far, 174,000. But if we're looking at, like, even if this is a minimum figure, double last year's figure of 265 million people starving. So even if you just take half that number, if it's double from last year, it's an extra well over 100 million people starving. And we've got this amount of people that have died of it so far this year. I mean, yeah. Anyway, so one World Food Programme Director warned widespread famines of biblical proportions could force millions already in vulnerable countries into starvation due to the global crisis. And what people do when they're starving, and in these countries, is they will move. They will obviously try and find a new place to go where they can get food. So these people will be crossing borders. They'll be migrating to wherever they can. Obviously, we've got problems with large swarms of locusts as well, which ironically is another biblical event. So yeah, it's not looking good, guys, food wise. I mean, there might be like a bit of a rebound and a hurrah when everyone is finally allowed out and to go back to work for the people that have still got jobs and the people that have got jobs for the time being. But when reality sets in, and the massive shock to the system that this has caused, I think that there's going to be serious problems. I mean, all other problems aside, one aspect of it that I definitely see causing an issue is that people are just going to be a lot more reluctant to spend, and they're just going to save. And then if people are saving that previously didn't save, that takes a lot of economic activity out of the system. It's going to cause huge problems, guys, like huge problems. Huge problems. And obviously central banks, they can't print food, can they? So the economic impact of the pandemic could lead to a humanitarian catastrophe, with the number of people suffering from acute hunger projected to nearly double to 265 million this year, the UN's World Food Programme warned. I will say we do get starving people in various countries in the world now, most notably Yemen, and no one seems to really care or do anything about it. And it's just ironic the extremes that they'll take because of this virus. But then thinking about what it's pretty much for certain going to cause in my mind. I mean, it's definitely going to cause these problems. Debates are raging worldwide over when and how to relax lockdowns imposed to prevent the spread of a highly contagious virus. Yes, I heard world food insecurity, the people in a situation of serious food insecurity in millions. So yeah, you can see, I mean, it's stayed pretty steady over the past 4 years. I would suggest though that this is a massive understatement. And in all fairness, it's probably going to be about up to somewhere around here, I'd have thought, on that chart. So a bit taller, I would say. So many leaders fear triggering another wave of infections, but are also worried about mounting economic costs and signs of social tension. We are on the brink of a hunger pandemic. The World Food Programme Director David Beasley told the UN Security Council in a video conference. Millions of civilians are living in conflict-scarred nations, including many women and children, faced with being pushed to the brink of starvation, with the spectre of famine a very real and dangerous possibility. The worst-case scenario could see famine in some 3 dozen countries, Beasley said. As the World Food Programme warned, the potential famine, a group of 20 agricultural ministers pleaded to ensure sufficient global food supplies for the poorest, the most vulnerable and displaced people. Freezes on whole sectors of commerce have already playing out dramatically on the oil markets, where prices have crashed due to the drop-off in energy demand and supply gut. So yeah, I mean, again, it's just the painting a pretty dire picture here. Yeah, I mean, you do look at the dislocations in the oil market and what you think that means, and what could that mean for other markets. I mean, if oil is going to crash like that, so what can happen is then obviously these oil refineries, they go bust, they can't necessarily keep making oil, and then prices maybe go back up again, maybe go too high, we get inflation start to kick in, we can't afford things, and when central banks have to print more money, and then we get more inflation. I mean, that could be a potential vicious cycle. So the deaths in US and Europe, total number of deaths since the 1st of March. So Europe and the United States, there we go. Before the pandemic crisis, Beasley was appealing for donor countries to increase food relief funding to the poorest countries because war and natural disaster were putting severe strains on the food systems. In East Africa, 70 million people were at risk of starvation after locust swarms tore through crops earlier than this year. This is the locust swarm I was telling you about. Apparently it's gigantic, and then also I've heard that there's another one now as well. He told The Guardian, "I was already saying 2020 would be the worst year since the Second World War on the basis of what we forecast at the end of last year. Now, my goodness, this virus is the perfect storm. It has taken us to uncharted territory. We are looking at widespread famines of biblical proportions. The United States, now the hardest hit country with more than 43,000 people dead and 784,000 infected. As the economic downturn starts to bite, President Donald Trump announced the US would temporarily halt immigration to the country, claiming it would save American jobs, some 22 million of which have already vanished in the wake of the virus shutdown." I mean, this number is obviously a lowball number as well. This number is going to be a lot higher and is a lot higher. So yeah, here we go. The vague threat was scant on details. This is obviously the threat of Trump banning immigration. The vague threat was scant on details, but suggested a hardening of its anti-immigration crusade, a move likely to delight supporters ahead of November's elections. In light of the attack from the invisible enemy, as well as the need to protect jobs of our great American citizens, I will be signing an executive order to temporarily suspend immigration into the United States, he tweeted. The White House did not provide any further details Tuesday about the measures or how long it would last. In hard-hit Europe, some countries are cautiously creeping out from confinement, although large gatherings appear to be out of the question for the foreseeable future. While Germany is allowing small shops to reopen, authorities cancelled Oktoberfest, a beloved beer swilling festival in the southern Bavaria, for the first time since World War II. Spain is announcing it was scrapping its annual bull running festival in Pamplona, 1 week, in 1 week though, children of Spain who have been housebound for over a month under tight lockdown will be allowed to accompany parents on food shopping and other sanctioned outings. I didn't realise that. So in Spain, apparently children aren't even allowed out of the house full stop, and now we're going to be allowed to accompany parents while shopping for food. I mean, this state, the world is the global elites, the people in charge are putting us under. I think it's pretty insane, to be honest, guys. I don't think it's warranted. Like, fully isn't warranted, because on the basis that fair enough if a lot of people will die, but a lot more people, like the millions that will die of starvation, and just the whole domino effects that will kill way more people basically for the next 10 years, 10-15 years that we're in a depression, and that we're basically screwed for. I mean, it's just not a good plan. Italy's Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has also promised it will soon unveil a plan to start reopening the hard-hit country, but in a sign of what lies ahead, the gradual awakening of Wuhan, the Chinese city where the virus first emerged, remains tinged with fear about fresh outbreaks of the disease. So yeah, so people are still going to be scared to go out, especially old people, especially vulnerable people. They're going to be scared, and then they may even end up being more scared, obviously, if they know more people around, and that more people will be carrying it around. It will be getting spread around more. So yeah, the industrial city was released from quarantine 2 weeks ago, but many restaurants, for instance, have not reopened and are still only able to offer outdoor seating and takeout. A lot of restaurants and places, a lot of things aren't going to reopen because, like I said, one of the very first things I just know for myself, if I'm trying to save money, eating out is one of the first things to go. And a lot of the time I do just think, even if I've got money to eat out, I still will often just like buy some nice steaks from the supermarket and just make some food at home, just because I know I get so much more food. Maybe it's different, maybe because I'm a growing lad, aren't I? I'm into my gym and stuff. I like to eat a lot of food, a lot of protein, a lot of good food, a lot of meat. So I mean, I'm maybe not representative of other people that might want to go out and eat like restaurant food, and do you know what I mean? And it's not necessarily a lot more cost efficient for them to just buy a load of steaks, because obviously you pay a lot more for those when you eat out than you do like whatever vegetarian options or pasta or pizza options maybe. But anyway, but either way, meals out are going to be one of the first things to go. So for sure, a lot of restaurants won't be open, and then also there'll be people that are still scared, that are not going to want their food to be prepared by someone else in the kitchen, handled by however many other people it gets handled by. I know obviously our food we get from the supermarket will get handled and at various points, but some people will just want to cut that down to a minimum. I mean, there'll always be a certain amount of people that will do that. So we have very few customers, says Han, a 27-year-old owner of a soy drink store. Everyone is worried about asymptomatic infected people, she said. Business is just not as good as before. I mean, it's not just because people are worried about that. People are worried about that, but people have got no jobs and no money. And also, if they have got jobs and money, or they have got no job and some money, they're saving it. Singapore, meanwhile, has become a sober example of how infections may ebb and flow, with a financial hub extending lockdown measures to Tuesday as it battles a second wave of contagion. Elsewhere, there is fear over how the vulnerable will survive lockdowns that breed their own dangers. In many parts of the world, including Latin America, weeks of confinement have seen huge surges in calls to helplines for victims of domestic abuse. 18 women have been killed by their partner or ex-partners in the first 20 days of Argentina's mandatory quarantine. Appeals to helplines have also shot up nearly 40%. Every day a woman is abused, raped, beaten at home by her partner or ex, said Ada Rico from the NGO La Casa del Encuentro. Misery on the continent will be compounded by the looming economic recession, which the UN body says will spike poverty rates in the worst contraction in a century. Financial markets continue to roller coaster ride after the price of US oil benchmark sunk below zero for the first time on Monday, sending world equities spiraling. I mean, yeah, this to me though. obviously these women are dying from domestic abuse, but obviously a lot more people are dying from the virus, and that's how you justify it. So why can't you just take that one step higher and higher up and just see, well, this amount of people are going to die from the virus, but this X amount larger number are going to die from the basically starvation, and just the economic, die from a direct result of the economic misery as a result of it. I mean, why can they not see that? Anyway, so a day after finishing its historic slide into negative territory amid a supply glut, US oil futures finished in positive territory, but the market remained under heavy pressure due to the oversupply as shutdowns constrained global growth. Wall Street tumbled on a second straight session on Tuesday as worries about chaos in the oil market overshadowed progress in Washington on additional relief for small businesses. Stocks did not get a boost from the deal between US lawmakers and the White House on a $480 billion emergency package which replenishes the depleted program to help small businesses devastated by the crisis. This is a whole other subject. This is just a crony capitalism fraud. This money just got snapped up quickly by large companies mainly, and not small companies, and then big banks that were dishing out the money. They have their banking relationships with larger companies and want to basically dish out larger loans for larger fees quickly and easily with less admin costs, and obviously dealing with, like, say 100 smaller businesses. So the first amount basically got robbed by corporate America, with obviously via the banks, and so we'll see what happens with this next lot. The Dow Jones Industrial Average finished down more than 630 points, or 2.7%. The aviation sector has been hammered particularly hard by the global economic pause, as cash-strapped Virgin Australia announced it had entered voluntary administration, the largest airline so far to collapse. Yeah, so that's the end of the article. So yeah, so it's a pretty gloomy picture, and it definitely needs to be taken seriously. It does make it. I do find it just crazy though how, like, you'll get that idiot Neil Ferguson, I think his name is, from Oxford University, that is just basically an attention seeker that releases reports saying like 500,000 people are going to die, and then he just reduces it. He did the same for bird flu, and he did the same, I think, for mad cow disease as well. He's just an idiot. There's no accountability. But my point is, like, they'll just believe these ridiculous numbers. But when the World Food Programme Director and other people are warning that this amount of people will become, do you know what I mean, hunger stricken, no one seems to really care that much. It's just it's not a really good situation, is it, guys? So anyway, I'll leave that with you. I'll leave a link to this article in the description, and thanks for listening.